We have with us Raza Rumi, whose actual name is Raza Ahmed. His pen name is Raza Rumi. He is a consulting editor with the Friday Times and also a policy director at the Jinnah Institute, Islamabad. We're going to ask Raza and sort of understand his perspective on the situation at LOC, where India has alleged that two of its soldiers have been killed and mutilated. I mean, one soldier, in fact, was beheaded. Raza, you must be noticing what's happening in India, though a lot of people in Pakistan tell me at the current moment this doesn't seem to be the main issue because Pakistan seems to be more involved with what's happening with the Shias there. But what do you think are the factors that has been in play in the current situation that took place a few days back at LOC?
Thank you, Kunal, for giving me this opportunity. I think there are three factors at play. First of all, that I think these LOC skirmishes after 2003 returned to haunt us after nearly a decade, especially at a time when India and Pakistan have made some remarkable progress in 2012. Now, despite I've read a lot of stuff which is coming out from India. I've participated in several talk shows where I can see, hawks sort of dominating the discourse. But the reality is that the Pakistani civil and military leadership would not want any trouble with India at this stage of our sort of national existence. Because Pakistan, number one, is mired into domestic problems of terrorism as well as political instability, because as I speak, I'm in Islamabad and, thousands are marching towards Islamabad for a sit-in to change the government. And, earlier you must have followed in India how the Hazara community was attacked by terrorists, and for 3 days the whole country was in a grip of fear, sadness, and there was a vibrant struggle by the civil society. So in these circumstances, I don't really think that because the refrain is that it is the military, Pakistan military, which is trying to sabotage the peace process. And I really don't think that any military or institution with even a modicum of common sense would be going for this kind of a strategy with India, especially when we have a problem on our western borders. So I think what perhaps, and the second factor is the lack of information and facts. Both in India and Pakistan, there have been stories and contradictions in what has come out. I mean, I heard one statement, I read it by the northern commander, I think General Kalia, who said that the mutilation had not taken place. And then earlier there was this whole issue about beheading of an Indian soldier. Now, I know that there are hotheads on both the sides on the border, especially in the standing armies, and they can overstep their jurisdictions, or sometimes they can indulge in certain activities which may result in escalation of conflict. But to be honest, the lack of adequate facts is a major issue here, because on both the sides, the received or given information is being tested as sacrosanct. I mean, there was a story in the Hindu as well by Praveen Swami, which said that a grandmother was trying to cross the LOC, and that's how the whole escalation began. So I really don't know, what to believe and what not to believe until the facts are not clear. We can't make a clear decision, and I think this is media responsibility to ascertain and sift facts from a lot of rhetoric and jingoistic positions. The third factor, I know I'm taking lots of time.
No, please.
The third factor, which is important, is that unfortunate trend of corporate media. It's not limited to India. It's not limited to Pakistan. It is a global problem. Corporate media wants to sell war, nationalisms, jingoisms, because they earn good profits, good TRPs, as they say, and therefore, they end up distorting the discourse to such an extent that people start, coming back with, the old ghosts of the past start emerging. Now, the reality in Pakistan is that all political parties, the civil society, the business lobby, even the military has been backing the peace process with India, particularly opening up of trade. Now, there are some last minute glitches, some of them are bureaucratic, some of them are like, last minute kind of holding back to the old position. But the reality is that there's no, on the street, there's no anti-India virulent sentiment that, okay, that was there when I was younger in school. I remember that that there was this whole thing about India being this villain in Kashmir and blah blah. That has changed now. People are, if anything, Pakistanis are more anti-American than anti-India, and some opinion polls reflect that only one quarter of Pakistanis think that India is a threat or something. That the three quarters don't, and they don't get that highlight or that projection in the Indian media, because obviously selling the enemy, the textbook enemy, earns you more profits.
But
So, I mean, Pakistan also go
I mean,
on.
it's interesting that you mentioned America. A lot of people here, at least this side of the border, believe that what's happening in Kashmir perhaps can't be read as a single incident. It has a larger connotation. What's going to happen in 2014 when the Americans leave Afghanistan? And recently, in fact, Tehelka broke the story about the Hurriyat leaders when they visited Islamabad. They met Hafiz Saeed and Saeed Salahuddin. And they were actually informed through informal sources that the militancy might increase in Kashmir in the coming days. So, for a lot of people, the reading is not at the micro, at a micro level. Rather, this is a hyper micro level. It's not even a micro level.
Yeah.
Do you think this has any link to the American game plan, or let's say the Pakistani game plan post the Americans leave Afghanistan?
But when the Americans leave Afghanistan, there would be a lot of instability in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan's border areas. I really don't see which military would open up two fronts at the same time. I mean, it means that they would be fighting or containing or manipulating some influence and leverage in Afghanistan. At the same time, they are sending jihadis into Kashmir. I don't buy this. I've heard this argument. And, I was on a TV show. I remember when the first story on LOC firing came up, and, I was contacted. And then I went over to, I mean, I was taken online, and this is what the policy wonks and said, oh, this has a US hand and this is Pakistan's. Blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that Pakistan military does not want to open up the Eastern Front. This is perhaps the reason this window of opportunity of 2012 arose, because the Pakistan military, a lot of analysts say that, wanted to pacify and normalize the eastern border, because a lot more was awaiting on the western side for at least in the medium term. See, 2014 is 2 years away, plus there would be 2 to 3 years more of instability. And Pakistan has to really deal with that. Pakistan has to deal with the domestic terrorism agenda. So I don't see a calculated policy on the part of Pakistan's military or civilian government to escalate tensions on LOC. Now, what has happened is unfortunate. I think was completely avoidable on both sides. Let me also emphasize that the first reported incident was that a Pakistani soldier was slain. And there's a video of his funeral as well. But nobody in Indian media, well, no, few, but mostly people don't talk about that incident in India. And why? I mean, objective reporting would require that there have been Pakistani casualties as well, and there's a tit for tat game going on. Now, I find that absolutely silly, because I think these neighbors, 65-year-old neighbors, committed to a certain peace process, must have some communication. So if the first incident or the second incident happened, they should have immediately picked up the lines, the DGMOs on both the sides, or the army quarters, or the foreign ministers, and should have just put an end to this. They should have advised their military commanders on the border, saying, please do not make it into another issue, because it really doesn't suit us. And frankly, it doesn't suit India either, because, I mean, fine, it's a nice diversion. I guess in the media or whatever, to revive the enemy after the sad memories of Bombay. Saying, "Oh, Pakistan is not behaving," quote unquote. Pakistan is a rogue state, quote unquote. Pakistan has all these jihadis until Pakistan doesn't kill jihadis. But you see, it is neither that simplistic nor that linear. And I'm the last person who would be parroting or drumming the Pakistani jingoistic narrative. But I can tell you very clearly that there is no mood in Pakistan to go to war with India or even to bleed India to death or even to do a soft wound or whatever your analysts call our strategy, bleeding
Which a former prime
by a
minister of
thousand
yours
cuts.
said, your wound and your cut, not Indian strategist. Thousand wound, if you remember, after 71. But
Yes, yes.
Raza, but tell us. I mean, of course, we do understand that Indian media did go overboard with reactions, and today we had the chief of army staff clearly mentioning that the whole hysteria that was build up in Pakistani media after the so-called Pakistani allegation that India was the first to sort of, I think, as you mentioned, slay a Pakistani soldier. But I mean, coming to the question about how each side reacted, while at one point, yes, as I mentioned and you mentioned, the Indian media reacted in a very jingoistic manner, but you also did have the Pakistani government stopping, or closing down the trade routes in the Kashmir Valley between both the countries, and also I think some people were stuck. I mean, that was a thing that was done by the Pakistani government. So, I mean, while Indian government did protest, but it did not take any harsh step to shut down the existing stuff. But I mean, it seems to be the Pakistanis' reactions.
I think, to be honest, Kunal, I think some of those reports, I've also seen them and I verified. I think there was perhaps a kind of a reaction from the side, but I mean, they're slightly exaggerated to say that the trade routes were shut and etc. etc. I think there's a slight exaggeration there because after all, our foreign ministers did talk, our Director General of Military Operations did talk, our yeah, this morning I think there were parleys on the line of control issue. So see that the dialogue is taking place. It's not as if Pakistan, this quote unquote, this rogue villain, has locked the border and saying that I'm going to send more jihadis. I mean, and I'm not going to talk to you. No, it's not the case. Now, really, I think what is required is impartial ascertainment of facts, and by either you see, and Pakistan has suggested that that UN border mission on Kashmir undertakes that. But I mean, it could be any other method. But really, I mean, let's get down to the facts. And the problem is that the facts are mystified here. The facts are not reliable, or let's say not fully reliable for us to conclude. I mean, for me to say that the Indians have transgressed and behaved aggressively, or for you to say that Pakistan is behaving the way it is, this rogue state, quote unquote, is, it's too strong a journey. And let's also face the facts. For 65 years, we have been, in this conflict. Pakistan has had, Pakistan has been insecure about India from day one. There were Indian leaders. I'm sorry, I'm delving into history because,
No,
it's
it's
always
okay.
good to remind ourselves that there were people in 1947, 48 who said, "Well, Pakistan's not going to survive. It's going to fade out or wither away." And then of course, there was a bitter memory of 60, 48, 65. And then, of course, the most bitter for Pakistanis and Pakistan armies, the 71 defeat, which was aided and engineered by India, in support of the Bengali nationalists. But surely there is all of that baggage, and then Kargil, and then Mumbai. So look at where we are starting from. The fact that in the last 2 years or so, we have come this way, that in 2008, Indian government said, we don't want to talk to Pakistan, no talks, etc. It's over. Pakistan also reacted. Our media's almost took us to war, and for 2 years there were no formal parleys. Track twos continued. Thank God for that. And finally, step by step, inch by inch, we've had a reasonably decent visa pact. We've had some great headway towards trade. Trust me, Kunal, I'm a Pakistani, and I think it's important that my friends on the other side of the border should know. When I was growing up, trading with India was like almost a sin. The kind of propaganda that was in Pakistan, through media, through so-called analysts and Urdu papers, it was as if you were to trade with India, you would sell your motherland. And frankly, the trade has started, and and in Pakistan, there's a big support for that. All of Pakistan's political parties, even the religious right-wing nuts, want to go and have trade with India, because everybody, there's a consensus. Okay, except those Hafiz Said types, whose bread and butter, whose raison d'être is hating India. And if they didn't have the Indian punching bag, they would be out of business on the streets with no money and no chandas to collect and no, you see. So forget about them, and they are not representative of the mainstream. The majority of Pakistanis, including the state elements, want to march with peace. They are elements in the Pakistani state, which I'm not in denial about, who would like to subvert the peace process. And I would be surprised if there are a few on your side as well. Who knows? So, in short, I think that until we get down to more facts, more confirmations and clarifications, we need to have a responsible debate. I mean, we should be raising questions. Question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to Indian Army, to the Pakistan Army, instead of parroting and beating the war drum. Because really, what is India going to achieve by waging a war against Pakistan? I mean, nothing is going to be achieved, because Pakistan is a nuclear armed nation. I mean, I'm not saying, that's a threat, but the question is that these are unfeasible options. I mean, and what is Pakistani media or Pakistanis going to achieve in India? India is huge. India is bigger. India has more weapons. I mean, India has a bigger conventional army, and everybody knows that India, if it marches in a conventional warfare, it is a bigger army. I mean, let's face it. So when both the sides know this, people know that, the journalists know that, the media, the analysts know that, and the policy community knows that, I really don't know what drives this jingoism. And unfortunately, it is the construction of these nations in 47, which just push Pakistan, India, and to some extent Bangladesh towards these really fantastic positions.
Let me just ask one last question quickly. Why do you think, with slightest provocation, we'll end up going back to almost square one? I mean, whether it is, soldiers, you have violation of the LOC agreement, or even smallest bit. I mean, of course, Mumbai was a much bigger incident. Why do we land up going with slightest provocation? We jump our guns and we talk about wars, and again, it's back to square one.
Well, I think Kunal, we need to consider. You're absolutely right, but it's a historical trend again. I think I said it the other day to some Indian publication that there are a few steps forward, there's a few steps back, few steps forward. I mean, this has been the unfortunate jerky path of Indo Pak relationship, or the peace efforts. But let me tell you the larger problem here. The larger problem here is because since 1965, we have built an iron curtain between the two countries. We don't allow people to travel. We don't allow students to exchange. We don't allow, and trust me, it is not just Pakistan. I keep on hearing this, that it is Pakistan which is at fault, and India is only reacting or blah blah. But the Indian bureaucracy, or let's say the official apparatus, whether it's a foreign office, whether it's a military, whether it's the agencies or blah blah, they are as myopic as, let's say, their Pakistani counterparts. The question is that what do Indians know about Pakistan? Other than the fact, and I'm talking about ordinary Indians, not the really suave people in your think tanks, or some high-profile journalists who visit Pakistan twice or thrice a year and have contacts. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about an average educated, professional, urban Indian. Very little, because all they have is a two-column story. So many beheaded in Pakistan, so many died in bomb blast, so many women sold off, or so many or some atrocity or the other. Or the other side, the Pakistani stars coming and performing, so a little figment of reality. The issue is we have closed the media. Our channels don't show in your country. Your news channels don't show in our country. The print magazines can't be exchanged. I mean, imagine in 21st century, only with the explosion of internet in the last few years, that some young Pakistanis are now meeting young Indians online. They're reading Indian publications. I mean, for one, I'm reading an Indian publications online, and thank God for that. That it has only happened in the last 10 years. Before that, there was a complete blackout, and I feel that in India also. Uh, there are stereotypes about Pakistani state and Pakistani society. So, for example, nobody recognizes the fact that in Pakistan, half of the university going population is women, or that women are more and more visible, or they're actually leading in so many sectors. There's this image of Pakistani women as in Taliban type burqas roaming around, and men carrying Kalashnikovs, to basically go and shoot an Indian on the border. It's actually it's a passe stereotype, and I'm not saying we have constructed immense stereotypes about Indians. So let me not even go into that, because I grew up with them in my textbooks in my school about how the Indians are mean, and how they are, and they have enmity towards Muslims, and how X Y Z. So these walls, these stereotypes inform the discourse. Somehow the serpent comes and starts biting any kind of a narrative, and that is where I feel that media, youth groups, civil society groups, the track to engagements, the arts and culture scene, they have so much to contribute, because until these trust deficits, not just at the state to state level, but at people to people level. So I'm on Twitter, and the majority of the other day I did a count, and I was surprised that a substantial number of my followers on Twitter are from India. And so of course some of them are great and some of them are not so great. And so anything happens like this LOC thing, and I start getting these hate tweets. Oh, you jihadis, you are out to kill us, and we're going to destroy you. And similarly, we have nut jobs on our side who go and start saying things to Indians. So I think all of that so-called public opinion, which is again a manufactured reality. It's not, it didn't come from a vacuum. People weren't born with hatreds. So that has to change, and that I think in the age of internet, in the 21st century, we can take it to the foreign policy discourse. We can take it to bilateral relations, and we have to pressurize our states and these moribund 19th century post-colonial bureaucracies, which still have paperwork. I went last time I crossed out into India, and at the Wagah border, or Tari, on the Indian side, I was with a delegation of parliamentarians, and there's a fancy new building over there, constructed with so much money, but the staff there were using manual registers. I mean, they were like entering every little micro detail, on customs, and like at least 4 or 5 times in the same processing over. And what I'm trying to say, that little thing showed that, despite the technological advance and all of India shining narrative, or on Pakistani side, our past high growth rate and blah, 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 our post-colonial states are the fundamental issue. They have to reform, because they come up with the same mindset, which is not pro-people, and which is inefficient, which is slow, and which has actually defeated the peoples of both India and Pakistan.
Thanks a lot, Raza, for talking to us. I hope to catch up once again to talk about Pakistan and India.